The more I think about the 2024 New York Jets season coming up, I don't know if I've ever been this excited about a roster top to bottom. And welcome back to New York Sports WickerMedia. I'm Watts UK99. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to watch these videos. So earlier on Monday, the news broke that the New York Jets were indeed signing wide receiver Mike Williams to a one-year contract worth up to $15 million. Absolutely the wide receiver that the Jets needed on the other side of Garrett Wilson. This team was definitely lacking in the wide receiver department. I think Williams, for many reasons, will be an excellent complement to Garrett Wilson. But it just got me thinking just about this overall roster. And I've been a New York Jets fan. I've been watching this team now for 35 years. I've seen a lot of teams, a lot of rosters, most of them somewhere between bad and mediocre. Some even less than bad. But as I think about where this roster is right now, with free agency still not done, and with the draft still about 5 or 6 weeks away, I think that we are shaping up to see maybe the most complete, the most balanced, and the most talented New York Jets roster that we have seen in decades. So, seriously, let's think about it. At quarterback, who do you have? Aaron Rodgers, one of the greatest of all time, recovering from his Achilles injury, but still with plenty of talent and ability to throw the football. Breece Hall, one of the top running backs in the NFL. Wilson and Williams at wide receiver. Obviously, they need a little bit more depth behind that. That's going to come in the draft. You've got a good stable of tight ends in Conklin, Ruckert, Yeboah at tight end. Pretty good mix there as well. They could possibly look at Brock Bowers in the draft if they look to do that. And now you've got the offensive line that you've needed. Maulers, pullers, punishers, with the led by Tyron Smith at left tackle, one of the best pass protectors in the NFL. You've got versatile pieces with Joe Tippmann and Elijah Vera Tucker. You've got a leader in Morgan Moses, and you've got a very good all-around player in John Simpson. When that's the weak link of your offensive line, that's pretty dang good. That's just the offense. Now the defense, I'm leaving coaches out of this. Take this ride with me. And then on the defense, you have an excellent defensive line led by Quinn and Williams up the middle, and a number of different pass rushers. Yes, it hurt to lose Bryce Huff, but you still have Jermaine Johnson. You still have John Franklin Myers. You've got Will McDonald up and coming. I still think Michael Clemens will have some ability to play there as well. Linebacker, not as important a position as it used to be, but you've got the leader in C.J. Mosley. You've got the breakout star in Quincy Williams. And in the secondary, you've got the best trio of cornerbacks in the NFL, despite what any Miami Dolphin fan would like to convince you of, between Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter II. And you got a pretty good safety duo right now in Tony Adams and Chuck Clark. Are there spots where, and hey, let's not leave out special teams. They brought back 2 excellent players in Thomas Morstead at punter, Greg Zuerlein at kicker. Now, of course, depth is needed. That is going to come in the draft. Of course, this team could still use a second running back, a slot receiver, another safety, different things like that. But the major holes have absolutely been plugged just a week into free agency. And I know I come on here and I've defended Joe Douglas amongst all criticism from Jets fans, but he has absolutely done his job as a general manager in free agency. You can't deny that. But I think about this roster right now. I went through all of that basically to do this. I just started thinking about some of the best Jets teams that I've seen over the last 20 or 30 years. And is this the best Jets team potentially that we've seen? I know we have questions about the coaching staff, especially on the offense, but looking at the talent, what are we looking at? I mean, you could go back to 2015, when Ryan Fitzpatrick was a quarterback who was really a journeyman veteran quarterback who had one fantastic season, and who was he throwing the football to? Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, very good 1-2 punch and wide receiver. But beyond that, what were we looking at? The tight ends were Jeff Cumberland and Kellen Davis. The third receiver was Jeremy Curley. You had a very good offensive line led by Ferguson and Mangold. And then on defense, that was really the highlight of the Sons of Anarchy with Muhammad Wilkerson, Sheldon Richardson, Damon Harrison. Leonard Williams was still there. The linebackers, very, very good with Demario Davis, David Harris, and Calvin Pace. Darrelle Revis obviously was getting a little bit long in the tooth, as was Antonio Cromartie. So you had a very good roster back then, but maybe not the upside with the position players. The top running back was Chris Ivory, and you certainly didn't have the upside at quarterback that you do now. Going back to 2010 with Rex Ryan. All right, Mark Sanchez was the quarterback. A lot of people say that Mark Sanchez got a very raw deal from the Jets, and maybe so, but he became a very turnover-prone quarterback. He was a good enough quarterback, that was surrounded by a whole lot. He was surrounded by the best offensive line probably in football. You had some weapons between Braylon Edwards, between Santonio Holmes, Jericho Cotchery. When they lost Cotchery and Holmes and Edwards after that season, they were never the same. But at running back, you had veterans. You had LaDainian Tomlinson. You had Sean Green as well on the younger side. And then with the defense, the thing with that defense, they really generated a lot of pressure, but it was more about Rex Ryan and Mike Pettin and figuring out exotic schemes and blitzes to generate the pressure. They didn't necessarily have that great pure pass rusher that this Jets team might have. Sean Ellis, Sione Puha, Mike DeVito. That was really your starting defensive line. Bringing the pressure was really Brian Thomas and Calvin Pace. And of course you had the best 1-2 corner combination probably in the NFL back then, because you had Revis and Cromartie, who were a little bit younger as well. But looking back, there definitely were some things missing on that team, and they were premium spots in the quarterback and the pass rush. They were good, but not to possibly the elite level that the 2024 team can be. And then we go back, I'll do three more. We go back to 2006. That was Eric Mangini's first season. You had Chad Pennington, a quarterback, Leon Washington as a rookie. Pretty decent wide receiver combo with Coles and Cotchery, Chris Baker at tight end. Ferguson and Mangold were rookies on the offensive line. You had Brandon Moore, and outside of that, Anthony Clement was your right tackle. But looking at the defense, this is kind of a weird defense. Your defensive line was Sean Ellis, Dwayne Robertson, and Kimo Van Olhoffen. Who's best remembered for basically destroying Carson Palmer's career. And then, linebacker, it was Brian Thomas, Eric Barton, Jonathan Vilma, who tried to play middle linebacker in the 3-4, and Victor Hobson. The starting corners were Andre Dyson and Hank Poteet. So that was asking quite a lot from that roster as well. Definitely some strengths, but some notable weaknesses as well. In safety, you had Eric Coleman and Kerry Rhodes, which was really good, but definitely some weaknesses at the premium positions. And going back a little further to 2004, you still had Chad, you still had Curtis Martin at the time. And you had some of the mainstays on the offensive line back then with Kevin Mawai, Jason Fabini, Pete Kendall, Brandon Moore, Kareem McKenzie. But your wide receivers were really Justin McCairns and Santana Moss. Anthony Beck was still here at tight end. And basically the same defense, except your cornerbacks were Donnie Abraham and David Barrett. Wow. Yeah, but you had, in defensive line, it was Ellis, it was Dwayne Robertson, it was Jason Ferguson. John Abraham was still here as well, so they were playing the 4-3 defense at that time. That's a pretty solid roster, actually, looking back, going back to 2004. I think that might be one of the best rosters they would have had. I think they're just kind of lacking some skill position players. When McCarron's, Moss, and Becht are your leading pass catchers, not the best spot, but still very, very good. And you had Curtis Martin, one of the greatest running backs of all time. And I went back also to 1998, when the Jets reached the AFC Championship game. You had Curtis there at just 25 years old. Vinny was there. He was 35. You had Wayne Corbett and Keyshawn Johnson, wide receiver. Your tight end, though, was Kyle Brady, but he was usually used as another blocker. And, the offensive line on that team, I'd be a good question. Name the 5 starting offensive linemen on the 98 Jets. That wouldn't be easy, but it would be Jumbo Elliott, Todd Berger, Kevin Mawai, Matt O'Dwyer, and Jason Fabini. I think maybe if I really thought about it all day, I'd have gotten 3 of those. Okay, and then on the defensive line, I mean, the only real marquee players that most Jet fans would remember would be, I don't know, Mo Lewis, Brian Cox, Aaron Glenn, Victor Green. But on the defensive line, you had Rick Lyle, Jason Ferguson, Ernie Logan, and Anthony Pleasant. You know, a bunch of workman-like defensive linemen, but again, no pure pass rusher, you know, who could get maybe double-digit sacks the way, you know, Jermaine Johnson would be able to, the way Quinnen Williams would be able to as well. So the point of all of this is I am, even before the draft, I think this roster is already one of the best I've seen the New York Jets have in all my years of rooting for this team. And with free agency still having a lot of players, a lot of role players left to sign, you know, maybe the Jets could bring back an Ashton Davis as their third safety, Justin Hardy to play special teams, maybe a running back like Dante Foreman is still out there. That's somebody I would bring in. You know, Patrick Taylor from the Packers, that's another running back you could think about. You know, Jerick McKinnon, another running back maybe worth considering as well. But you know what? With that, with all these free agents still out there, there's still some good ones, and the draft coming up where the Jets have the number 10 pick, where they could do whatever they want with it. Trade down, draft another offensive lineman, draft another weapon. They have so many options, and with the draft coming up in about 5 or 6 weeks, I am super, super excited about what could happen, but we're going to have the next 5-6 weeks to think about it, and man, oh man, what an exciting time to be a New York Jets fan. It's amazing how the narrative can change in just 1 week. You know, all the people with the flaming pitchforks out for Joe Douglas wanting his job, they owe him quite the apology. Quite the apology. Well, hey, want to say this? Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Join me on the New York Sports WickerMedia channel. We're going to go live. We're going to talk about Tyron Smith. We're going to talk about Mike Williams, get really granular, break down why they are such good additions to this Jets roster. And also, we're going to talk about the winners and the losers of free agency to this point. Who's taken steps forward, who's taken steps backward, and who's kind of like on the fence. Who's made some moves that could really work out but could really fall on their face as well. You won't want to miss it. So everybody, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you right back here with more content from you know where, the Wicker Chair.